Global response. Africa's Ebola crisis takes center stage at the United Nations. Funding the fight. How ISIS is in business to finance its militant aggression. Speaking out. An American sentenced to hard labor in North Korea explains the rough conditions he faces. And digital evangelization. We explore the church's social media strategy. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, September 25th, 2014. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Iraq's prime minister says his government has received intelligence that Islamic State terrorists plan to attack subways in the U.S. and Paris. A senior Obama official says the U.S. government is not aware of any such plot. That official says Iraqi leaders didn't bring up a possible attack during meetings with the U.S. this week in New York. Iraq's prime minister didn't say where the U.S. attack could take place. New York's mayor is expressing confidence in the security of that city's huge subway system.
We are convinced that New Yorkers are safe. We're convinced people should go about their normal routine.
Mayor de Blasio and New York City's police commissioner assured commuters that police are closely monitoring the situation. The U.S. launched airstrikes against Islamic State positions in Iraq last month, expanding those strikes to Syria this week. Western leaders have voiced concerns that ISIS could extend its operations outside the Middle East. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies continue to hit ISIS targets in Syria and Iraq. Jason Calvi joins us with that part of the story.
Brian, beheadings, forced conversions, terrorism. It's the work of the Islamic State, a group with big guns and cash. Today and overnight, a team of 16 U.S., Saudi, and United Arab Emirates fighter jets bombed ISIS targets. They hit military sites like an Islamic State training center, but they're also going after one of ISIS's largest sources of cash.
They can fund as much violence, frankly, as they want to fund with that purse book.
Terrorism analyst William Braniff says the Islamic State operates like a terror group and a business. Some funding comes from selling oil on the black market in Turkey. Analysts estimate the group is raking in $2 million a day.
For an organization that is not a state-sponsored organization, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria is the most well-funded terrorist organization that we've seen.
But the U.S.-led airstrikes are targeting, in part, the ISIS funding stream. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says at least 4 oil installations and 3 oil fields were hit today. And the Pentagon says there are other targets of value that have been attacked.
One of the targets that we hit a couple of nights ago was their finance center. I mean, they actually have a finance center. This is a well-resourced group. There's no question about that.
Braniff says extortion and donations also fund the Islamic State.
There are a lot of outside parties which might be willing to send resources into the conflict, whether that's money or materiel.
But another ISIS resource is cheap: social media.
Fighters are also able to generate their own content and communicate directly with individuals on the ground outside of Iraq and Syria. So there's a much more personal means of communication in the social media space. And I think that's in part an explanation for why we've seen so many foreign fighters.
At least a dozen militants are thought to have been killed in the bombings today. That according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. They say 5 others, maybe wives and children of the militants, also died. But Brian, right now the Pentagon's not able to yet confirm if any civilians died in those bombings.
Thank you, Jason. Well, the FBI says it has identified the terror suspect who spoke on camera in those widely circulated videos of recent beheadings. FBI Director James Comey gave no further details. He says he won't reveal the man's name or nationality. The terrorist spoke in a British accent in several videos before and after an ISIS victim was beheaded. The FBI director won't say if the man actually carried out those killings himself. That director is criticizing a decision by Apple and Google he says could impede federal investigations. The two companies say their new operating system will be encrypted, making data inaccessible to law enforcement without a court order. FBI Chief Comey says U.S. officials are in talks with both companies. He accuses them of letting people put themselves beyond the law's reach. He cites child kidnappings and terrorism as 2 examples where quick access to cell phone data could save lives. Law enforcement could still intercept conversations. They just couldn't access call data, contacts, photos, and email stored on smartphones. And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. The man fronting the administration's legal efforts from terrorism to civil rights is stepping down. The president announced this afternoon Attorney General Eric Holder's resignation. Wyatt Goolsby reports tonight from the White House. Wyatt.
Brian, according to one Justice Department official, Eric Holder's plans to resign have been in the works now for several weeks. It was finalized during a conversation during the Labor Day weekend between President Obama and Eric Holder. And so it was made official today by President Obama in a statement at the White House after President Obama returned from attending the UN General Assembly in New York. Eric Holder has put in 6 years on the job. He's one of 3 original members of Obama's cabinet still serving in the administration. In a letter, the Attorney General thanked the president for the opportunity to serve in the administration, calling it, quote, the greatest honor of my professional life.
Thanks to his efforts, since I took office, the overall crime rate and the overall incarceration rate have gone down by about 10%. That's the first time that they've declined together at the same time in more than 40 years.
I have loved the Department of Justice ever since as a young boy. I watched Robert Kennedy prove during the Civil Rights Movement how the department can and must always be a force for that which is right.
The 63-year-old former judge and prosecutor has been one of the most progressive voices on Obama's cabinet. He's also seen his share of controversy, including Operation Fast and Furious. That's the botched gun trafficking probe that put guns in the hands of Mexican drug cartels, leading to the death of a U.S. Border Patrol agent. Memos show he was aware of the operation for close to a year, not a few weeks, as he stated. He refused to step down in 2011.
Mr. Attorney General, the blame must go to your desk, and you must today take the real responsibility.
We cannot afford to allow the tragic mistakes of Operation Fast and Furious to become a political sideshow.
Most recently, Holder has launched a federal probe into the death of Michael Brown. He's the unarmed teenager who was shot by a local police officer in Ferguson, Missouri last month. Now, White House officials have not said that the president has made a final decision on who will be the next U.S. Attorney General. We can tell you, though, that Eric Holder is the first African-American to hold that position. Brian?
Thank you. Wyatt Goolsby at the White House. At the United Nations today, Iran's president warned the world against the dangers of extremism. Hassan Rouhani says Islamic terrorists like ISIS want to create conditions for foreign intervention in the region. He also says their goals are destroying Middle East civilizations and contributing to a rise of Islamophobia.
To uproot extremism, we must spread justice and development and disallow the distortion of divine teachings to justify brutality and cruelty. The pain is made greater when these terrorists spill blood in the name of religion and behead in the name of Islam.
Iran's president also said an agreement over Iran's nuclear ambitions could still be negotiated with Western powers by a November deadline. One group following the UN proceedings is very concerned about a proposed development plan. Members of World Youth Alliance have been attending sessions this week in New York. Their goal is promoting the dignity of the person and the value of human life. One Alliance member says a French proposal to project its domestic agenda on the global stage goes too far.
Under the current government of France, we've seen a very progressive agenda, and that was in full force in her comments. They were more extreme and more direct than anyone else on the need for widespread abortion, widespread contraception, and all those kinds of things that we're very concerned about.
The nonprofit group says it's concerning when a nation treats a population like a problem. An American imprisoned in North Korea was permitted a brief public appearance today. Matthew Miller was brought to a Pyongyang hotel to make a phone call to his family. He was convicted September 14th of entering North Korea illegally to commit espionage. The 24-year-old was under close guard today. He was only given time to respond to one question from the Associated Press about prison conditions.
Prison life is 8 hours of work per day. Mostly it's been agriculture, like in the dirt, digging around. Other than that, it's isolation. You have no contact with anyone. But I've been in good health.
Miller also showed letters he's written to influential Americans pleading for help. He's one of 3 Americans detained in North Korea. We don't know if any efforts to negotiate their release have been arranged or if North Korea would accept any such offer. A man charged with abducting a missing University of Virginia sophomore has now been captured in Texas. 32-year-old Jesse Matthew was arrested yesterday on a beach near Galveston. He's accused of abducting Hannah Graham, an 18-year-old sophomore who has been missing since September 13th. Texas authorities believe Matthew may have been trying to escape to Mexico. He's now awaiting extradition to Virginia. Police are still searching for Hannah Graham. A painful reminder tonight of the human toll of the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the New York World Trade Center. The Fire Department of New York City says 3 retired firefighters who worked at Ground Zero died on the same day this week. Lieutenant Howard Bischoff and firefighters Robert Lever and Daniel Hegland died Monday from 9/11 related illnesses. The 3 worked at Ground Zero after the attacks. 1 had leukemia, 1 esophageal cancer, and the 3rd colon cancer. New York's fire department lost 343 firefighters on 9/11/2001, and now 3 more 13 years later. May they all rest in peace. Coming up, movie makers want to use drones to give audiences a new view of the action. And following the church takes on new meaning in the age of social media. On Thursday, September 25th, thank you for watching EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. In Hong Kong, police and protesters may be headed for a showdown over democratic beliefs. Protest organizers want Hong Kong citizens to be able to directly elect their own leader in 2017. They're telling fellow activists to bring food, goggles, and sleeping bags for a sit-in near the city's financial district. A Hong Kong report claims 7,000 police will be dispatched to handle these protesters. Organizers say they'll go through with their plans regardless.
If the police at the end does not grant a permit for a legal assembly, we will believe that it is an infringement on civil rights of Hong Kong people, because attending and organizing legal assembly is part of our civil rights.
Leaders will announce on Sunday the exact time of the planned sit-in. Student organizers began a 5-day class boycott earlier this week. President Obama says the world hasn't done enough to stem West Africa's deadly Ebola outbreak. His remarks came at a high-level UN meeting today in New York. Susanne LaFrankie is here with that story.
Brian, the president said if the epidemic of Ebola is not stopped, the disease could cause a humanitarian catastrophe, a crisis that can quickly become a global threat to the entire world. He said the spread of the virus is more than a health issue, but also a growing threat to regional and global security.
It's a marathon, but you have to run like it's a sprint. That's how the president says the world must respond to the deadly Ebola outbreak.
If ever there were a public health emergency deserving an urgent, strong, and coordinated international response, this is it.
Obama's message to world leaders: their help could save tens of thousands of lives. He's dispatching 3,000 U.S. troops to Liberia to set up clinics and provide training to help the Africans treat Ebola victims. But just $50 million of President Obama's $1 billion request has been approved for immediate use by Congress. That could be a critical setback in a situation that experts are calling dire.
Every day, every minute counts.
According to the World Health Organization, the number of people killed by the Ebola outbreak in West Africa is nearing 3,000. Among the hardest hit nations are Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone.
Ebola is not only a disease of Sierra Leone and its neighbors, it is a disease of the world.
And nearly 2 months after the WHO declared the outbreak a global health emergency, its latest analysis shows clinics and hospitals in the region are woefully inadequate.
You have all seen the photographs, the videos, the headlines. Sick and dying patients are being turned away. They are turned away from overflowing treatment centers.
Dr. Chan added that in a human world, we cannot allow the people of West Africa to suffer so much, that all nations have an obligation to help. Brian?
Thank you, Suzanne. The 3rd American aid worker infected by Ebola in Africa is now leaving the hospital. Dr. Rick Sacra says he's been cleared of the virus by the CDC. He was treated in an isolation unit for about 2 months at a Nebraska hospital. He thanks God for his recovery and good health.
I feel great, except that I am extremely weak. I have a little exercise bike that the physical therapy people and others managed to bring into my room. And I can do, well, now I'm up to 5 minutes on that exercise bike.
Sacra received a mix of treatments, including a blood transfusion from Kent Brantley, an American physician who also contracted the disease and is now better. One other American is still being treated for Ebola in Atlanta. Another Spanish priest diagnosed with Ebola has died. Father Manuel Garcia Viejo was serving as a medical director at a Sierra Leone hospital where he contracted the disease. He first received treatment in Liberia, then returned home to Spain before his death. Last month, Father Miguel Pajares was flown from Sierra Leone to Spain for treatment, but died on August 12th. Up next, let the bidding begin. 3 rare pieces of art are about to be auctioned in New York. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday evening for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Drones may be coming to a theater near you, or at least pictures from the drones. The FAA says it will issue drone permits for a small group of movie and film companies. With a few exceptions, drones can't be used for commercial purposes. Drones could fundamentally change movie making. One company applying for a permit says they could give directors shots they've never been able to get before. Well, from lawyer to Lego artist, an American sculptor's Lego art exhibit created using more than 1 million toy bricks debuts in London tomorrow. Nathan Sawaya's exhibition includes more than 80 sculptures. This T-Rex is made with 80,000 Lego pieces. The sculptor's work has been showcased in New York, LA, Melbourne, Shanghai, and Singapore. For its British debut, Sawaya added an iconic red telephone booth and a tribute to the Fab Four, the Beatles. He says it can take weeks to create a full-scale piece in his studio.
I used these rectangular bricks to create the art. These little rectangular bricks with sharp corners, right angles. But by blending them together and building step by step, brick by brick, eventually we form curves. And when you look at the art that I've done, I've created human forms with all their intricate curves, but made out of little rectangles.
And he does it very fast, too. The Art of the Brick runs in London through the end of the year. That, of course, is time-lapse photography. Hey, unless you're loaded, don't bother bidding at a pair of November art auctions at Christie's in New York. Catherine Zeltner has a preview.
A rare painting by French Impressionist Manet will be auctioned on November 5th. The mid-1860s work, portraying a young French actress in a floral dress holding a parasol, is expected to bring in a bundle.
The estimate that we have assigned it, the pre-sale estimate, is $25 to $35 million, which is perfectly situated around the artist's world record price of $33 million. So we expect it to achieve something in that range.
The following week, Christie's offers a pair of Warhol paintings featuring Elvis and Marlon Brando.
What's fantastic about this is it's painted on raw linen. So where the silver Elvis is painted on a sprayed surface, here the silkscreen is literally impregnated into the raw linen.
Christie's says these 2 paintings have never appeared at auction before and could bring a combined total of $130 million. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
I will not be bidding. Well, a virtual network of schools inspired by Pope Francis in Argentina to promote dialogue is expanding its reach. This week's Scholas presented the project to Ban Ki-moon at the UN General Assembly. This happened during a meeting with Argentine President Cristina Kirchner. The group recently hosted a Google Hangout with Pope Francis. During that chat, school children in 5 different countries were able to ask the Pope questions. Scholas leaders visited EWTN News Nightly today explaining the project's goals.
This is the goal of Scholas, to help young people today pass on their values among their peers.
What the Pope has asked is that technology not widen the gap between people, but rather be a tool so that everyone has access to a high-quality education.
This past March, Scholas received official recognition from the Vatican, becoming part of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Scholas plans to open chapters in North America, Europe, and Africa before 2017. We have Scott Landry with us, the author of Transforming Parish Communications. This is a book about digital media outreach, and we're talking about the idea of a digital missionary. This is all part of the digital evangelization, the new evangelization. How would you say a digital missionary differs from traditional missionaries in the church and is the same in some respects?
So in the same, we went traditionally where people were at, who needed to hear more about Jesus Christ. So many people spend their lives, all their free time on social media and new media. So we want to be present there as a church, bringing the same sorts of messages to them about God's promise of eternal life.
And Pope Francis leads the way. He loves to take to Twitter. Let's see what he said. He just tweeted today, "Jesus understands our weaknesses and our sins, and he forgives us if we allow ourselves to be forgiven." I take that message to heart. To whom do you think that message was aimed?
His message is to every single one of us. That was his first message in his public address, the first Sunday after he was named Pope. So he's always telling us about mercy, and he's encouraging us to not get tired of asking for God's mercy and never let the amount of times we struggle in sin to prevent us from going to the sacraments.
So this world is centered around digital communication now, this social media, and the church recognizes that, and it has had strategy, but now some of that strategy is changing. Are these changes significant? What can you tell us about them?
So the Commission in Rome, they're looking at the best ways to deploy the resources that they have available to reach as many people as possible. They really like the progress being made in social media, and some of the cardinals in the last conclave looked at Vatican Radio as one example of an effective technology, but an expensive technology. And I think we'll see over the next year or two that some of the resources spent on Vatican Radio will be deployed in these new technologies like Facebook and Twitter and mobile apps.
Yeah, the content can still be delivered, just on different platforms.
And you want to reach people in countries that don't have access to the church or don't have access to television or radio. So new media might be able to come in. But those little messages Pope Francis puts out, they're retweeted higher than any other leader in the world. It's an effective way to share 140 characters at a time, the saving love of Jesus Christ.
I think that's great, the way those get tweeted. I still can't even say tweet. Why did you write this book, Transforming Parish Communications, Scott?
So my hope is that parishes will fully embrace new media as a form of outreach. There are so many Catholics that we know in every parish community that don't join us for the Sunday Eucharist. Each person that we're trying to reach is probably 1 degree removed from any one of us who are living the faith and present on social media. So by just posting a message here now and then about going to church or the challenging message of our parish, or retweeting one of the tweets from Pope Francis, we can tell people that the church is still there for them, and hopefully it plants a seed that they respond to.
I love the idea of inviting, and you can really do that very effectively with social media, right? We don't have to beat people up digitally, but just remind them that, hey, I'm going to church. Would you care to go? Come on back. Come at least visit. Try confession.
I encourage people in the book to tithe 10% of their messages on social media about faith related. So for me, I'll talk about the Red Sox, I'll talk about my kids, I'll talk about what's going on in my community, and then I'll insert a message here or there about faith. So therefore, people don't tune out my message. They hear all of them, including the faith-related messages.
Well, some people here in Washington have basically tuned out your message about the Red Sox because they're Nats fans. Finally, do you think that the church is keeping up with the power of social media as well as some of the other faiths are?
Well, we can play catch-up. The Mormons are tremendously effective at using digital media. Some of the evangelical megachurches I've learned a lot from as I put together this book. And we have some great parishes across the country that are leaders, but we have 17,500 parishes in the U.S., and it's my hope that each one of those 17,500 will be effective users of new media, promoting it to their parishioners so that parishioners are digital evangelists.
I'm looking forward to reading your book, Transforming Parish Communications, from our Sunday visitor, Scott Landry. Thanks for visiting us.
Thank you, Brian.
And thank you for watching tonight. You can follow us on Twitter and watch again anytime on EWTN's YouTube page. Like us on Facebook, too. For all of us at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night and God bless you.